Hello and welcome to... Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. It's been a long year, but we've finally reached the time of ghosts and goblins, tricks and treats, and horror and Halloween. But most importantly, this is the month of the 10th anniversary of this show. Oh, and I guess Moarte's doing his thing. Yay. Throughout 2018, we have been celebrating this milestone by revisiting past reviews, and October is going to be no different. The tradition around here has been to look at a horror franchise I love for 3 years before moving on to another one. But before we can go forward, let's take one last look back. From 2009 to 2011, I reviewed comics tied into the video game franchise Silent Hill. Every single one of them was terrible, with maybe one of them sort of reaching okay. But let's face it, they were all really, really bad. For those of you new to the table, especially since Konami has done such a fantastic job screwing over this franchise, Silent Hill is about, well, Silent Hill, a New England town where there was once a cult that wanted to birth their god into existence by tormenting a little girl to the point of setting her on fire. As you may have figured, the immolation method of pregnancy didn't really go as they expected. While the cult, known as the Order, is a big part of some of the games, it's clear that the town itself is sitting on something big and dark and terrible, especially since it has a pretty massive track record for murder and abusive families. And the Order likely woke it up, leading to some other games in the franchise, namely Silent Hill 2, where people come to the town and get to confront all their sins, sometimes finding redemption, while at other times getting dead. The games are dark, moody, full of symbolism and deeper meaning, and it can be a truly melancholic experience while exploring rich characterization and just a ton of creeping horror. Also, sometimes aliens show up. And now that I've explained a little of Silent Hill and the utterly fascinating and wonderful parts of this survival horror series, you can throw most of that out, because the comics I reviewed were absolute garbage that barely had anything to do with the series. Written by Scott Siensen, the original Silent Hill comics are a very incoherent mess concerning a different version of the Order, purportedly headed by a white-haired guy named Whatley. There's also a demonic little girl named Christabella who was murdered in the town and then resurrected so she could be foul-mouthed and annoying, and eventually she gained command over the entire place. The story seemed to be going for a more generally vague Lovecraftian vibe for things, but the key word there is vague. I tried to read the summaries of the stories on the Silent Hill Wikia to see if that would help, but I am still utterly confused about what is going on in those books. It feels like Siensen had some other story he wanted to tell and just plugged some Silent Hill references into it. But the thing is that while the comics contain so much ambiguity about what's going on, it also has all the subtlety of getting stabbed by a great knife. Nobody shuts the hell up in them. There is no atmosphere, no quiet moments of terror, and the artwork in most of the stories is just god-awful, and you'll be lucky if you'll be able to figure out how things flow from one panel to the next without feeling like you missed something. Scott Siensen tragically passed away in 2014. While I despise these comics, I meant no particular ill will towards him as a person, and I am saddened by his death. Truth be told, he was the comics creator in all of this show's run that I've actually kind of wanted to meet, because I am genuinely curious about the creative process for writing these things, why he chose to make them like this. Other Silent Hill comics came later, and all of them by Tom Walsh. They are much better than the original run of stories, though far from perfect. However, there is another comic by Scott Siensen that I never covered on the show, and with good reason. It's not a comic in the traditional sense, and that's why we're here today. Silent Hill: The Experience was a UMD title released for the Sony PSP as a tie-in to the 2006 Silent Hill movie. Said experience is a collection of trailers, music tracks, a few random snippets of video, and 2 motion comics. The first is an adaptation of Silent Hill Dying Inside, which I covered in 2009, but the other is an exclusive tale called Silent Hill Hunger. Originally, I thought I would never cover this because, well, I had no idea how to capture PSP footage. I didn't have a copy of it, and I had long ago swore to never cover motion comics because they're really a different medium. And technically speaking, I'm not doing that today either. Someone on a Silent Hill blog uploaded every single panel from the motion comic, naturally without motion. So, I'm gonna be covering all of that in this review as if it was a traditional comic. Let's dig into Silent Hill Hunger.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a birdie hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Naturally, this has no cover and drops us into the action right away. A word of warning about this episode, there obviously won't be any variations in the panel layout and way I usually pan over the book. By virtue of how I'm covering the story of this thing, everything is just a single rectangular frame at a time, and I can't mimic the actual experience of how this reads if you were watching the motion comic. Anyway, we open on a Force ghost traveling awkwardly along a street. Picture, if you will, Silent Hill Gazette star reporter Douglas Payne Brenneman wanders his beat, lost in what must be a dream. After all, he usually glows purple, not blue. The area starts glowing a brighter blue. A nightmare.
Did I ever tell you my favorite color was blue?
Half of Silent Hill has burned. Familiar storefronts are shattered. Vandalized. Not the Silent Hill Pizza Hut! They made the slices look like little pyramid heads! The blue glow is actually supposed to be mist. It consumes the entire town, like something desperate, alive, hungry. Well, again, this wouldn't be a problem if we still had the Silent Hill Pizza Hut! Silent Hill has been abandoned. But hey, at least it doesn't have a freeloading artist and a bunch of commando cheerleaders. Out of the mist emerge monsters from the game. A frequent problem with any of the comics is the liberal use of Silent Hill monsters, especially Pyramid Head, despite the fact that each game tailors the monsters specifically to the game's characters. They're deliberate reflections of the psyches of those inhabiting the town. Admittedly, sometimes it's very abstract, but it is a thing. Say what you will about the lack of imagination in Silent Hill Downpour's monsters, but at least they were still following that theme. In any case, this is revealed to be a daydream that reporter Doug is telling his girlfriend Rosie about. Huh, freaky looking monster thingies. That would look good in a headline, wouldn't it? Freaky looking monster thingies attack. What? That'd never be a headline. Now, you won't believe these 10 freaky looking monster things. That's a title that'll grab people. Rosie says, good lord, look at how tiny her hand is there. Who's got one thumb that's poorly drawn? This lady right here. In the last panel featuring it, they actually try to cover it up. Anyway, she says not to worry about the dream. It's a gorgeous day. This is our home. Silent Hill is just fine. Maybe 20 years behind the times in ways. I'm still not sure why they're premiering Transformers the movie now, but whatever makes them happy. You know what I think this is? You're afraid of getting used to things here. You're afraid of falling in love with this town, just like everyone else who lives here. I mean, just look at that couple we met at the hotel. James and Mary, they were just visiting, but I'm sure they'll be coming back soon. Doug delivers some awkward exposition about how he got fired from his previous job, supposedly because of his ego. So what if I was onto that Pulitzer with my take on those gangsters, the oil company's Homeland Sec? And of course, my headline idea. My hot take on those gangsters, oil companies, and Homeland Security thingamabobs. Rosie wants him to just come enjoy himself with her, mostly with lots of sex, but he's obsessed with finding a story in the town that'll allow them to leave Silent Hill behind them. Okay, I see this kind of thing a lot in fiction. Is it a regular thing for a reporter to discover some story and then suddenly dozens of job offers come flowing in? We cut to a few hours later at the annual flower show. Oh, Silent Hill has the best flower shows! This one woman named Lisa is putting together a lovely array of petunias and tulips and... Oops, never mind, it's been canceled. Doug is miserable covering it, not helped by a woman who rambles on to him about his old career. I went on that whole interweb business, or whatever it's called, at the library and looked up those amazing stories you used to write. 15 photos of Kardashians eating food? I've never seen such brilliant journalism! I'm not too far off with that joke. Apparently he made a juicy one about a singer who'd been hiding her illegitimate child. So apparently Doug is a tabloid writer seeking bigger and better things. He's soon regretting his decision to not spend the day with his wife, but then, guy out of nowhere pointing at Doug and a sound effect? What the hell is going on? Is he using a sonic screwdriver on him? It's only after the sound effect disappears that we see that it's being made by an ambulance behind the sound effect. I've got to imagine this played out better in the motion comic version, which probably had an actual sound effect behind it. Although in actual motion, I wonder how awful this really plays out. Because when I put these panels together in motion, it means the ambulance is moving at a snail's pace and somehow distorting space so that it blurs the plants in the greenhouse.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
Anyway, the guy pointing is actually his editor, who's attending the flower show for some reason, and ordering him to chase the ambulance because they may be looking at the crime of the century. Oh, don't worry, that cop already found the culprit of the stolen book at Bible camp. Incidentally, do you like carrots? Doug heads out to the old Fastbinder place, where a woman had apparently been trapped by someone who was trying to kill her. Again, it's so bizarre reading a motion comic like this because of the way they only really have one narrative caption or speech balloon happening at a time. It's like reading a lenticular comic. Each new bit of writing shifts around depending on how you look at it. Or it's multiple choice. The same panel, but enjoy some different dialogue options to craft your story. Anyway, the sheriff, Bryce Canavan, and his deputy are reluctant to share anything with Doug, since he talks a big game about journalistic rights, but really is just about sensationalism. A story isn't a real story until there's a corpse in it somewhere. Election day results? Pfft, where's the rotting carcass? The body being lifted into the ambulance, though, is actually the officer who responded to the 911 call, which was serious business for Silent Hill. The first murder in 10 years. Ha! Sure, right! Frankly, half the town should be dead based on all the stuff that happens to it, and the only reason that's not the entire town is because the other half was abducted by aliens! We learned that there was enough blood splattered on the walls for 2 victims. However, Doug's conversation with his editor, named Mario, is interrupted when Doug notices someone standing in the distance. Who's that guy, Mario? I don't remember seeing him around, and this town's about the size of a fire hydrant. He's been watching this whole thing for a while. Oh, that's just the Watcher. He appears sometimes for no adequately explained reason to merge with you when you regenerate. When we close in, we see he's actually some white-haired dude in a coat. However, Mario can't see him. The guy then proceeds to do the object appearing in front of him that makes him disappear horror movie thing. It's funny to imagine that what's actually happening in those moments is the figure leaping on to the bus or train or whatever passing by and clinging on for dear life, going, "Oh man, I really got them!" Doug is disturbed by both the guy's disappearance as well as the feeling in his gut that there either were or there soon would be more victims. So hell, eventually my mood did brighten up. Oh boy, murder victims! That sure makes me happy! At the newspaper office, Mario is berating Doug for just sitting on his ass instead of seeking out more info on the story, introducing us also to office sloucher Perkins. What, you think a story like this writes itself? What are you, taking lessons from Perkins over there? And you, yeah, you, Perkins, what do you want, you misbegotten tail dragger? Well, I just wanted you to look at this story about the hole that was there that's gone now. Yeah, sure, but then I want you to go over to Chastain Heights and interview that Amy Johnson lady. I think she's got real Mother of the Year potential, and I think the readers could use a real, heartwarming human interest story. Doug narrates to himself about how Silent Hill really could be thought of as heaven. Got the family barber, the 5 and dime with an old-fashioned soda jerk, A movie theater with just one giant screen. Unfortunately, the only movie they ever play is It's Pat. Civic pride still means something here, because decent people and decent values and plain old decency still exist in Silent Hill. Why, just over there is the town doctor, Michael Kaufman. Just an upstanding citizen all around. Oh, get this, they actually add a little lens flare to this photo to make this dude's teeth sparkle. And of course, the effect is absolutely awful thanks to this low-res, heavily filtered photo they used for this panel, so it's absolutely disjointed from the rest of the image and just looks terrible. I kind of love how bad it is, and almost feel like that's the point. He also mentions Silent Hill as a resort town, and I'm almost dead certain that this image is supposed to be James and Mary from Silent Hill 2. Hunger was the final Silent Hill project of Scott Jensen's that was released. Did someone finally hand him a copy of the games to play? Anyway, with his little monologue finished, Doug narrates about what he was actually doing at the office. Namely, making dozens of calls to private detectives, wire services, the FBI, etc. Just anybody who could give him some information about the story. Perkins delivers a journal, saying it was delivered for him. My journal. I am 8. Oh hey, a prequel to Stranger Things. Inspecting the journal, he sees child drawings a little girl made featuring slug creatures with sharp teeth, a nurse's cap, a severed hand, and 2 doctors dragging the girl away, also mentioning that she's so hungry, been here so long. Which would be incredibly creepy and be a good tie-in to why this story is named that. Unfortunately, it's not. Because now, a fifth of the way through the story, it assumes we're idiots and that we forgot what the title is. The journal starts glowing, and a tentacle monster with teeth at the end of each tentacle leap out of it. Oh, what the hell? It's next week that we're covering The Thing! Sweet mother of Christ! F***ing trying to eat me! I haven't even gone in the oven yet! There's a flash and the monster vanishes, making him think he just hallucinated it. He recalls also that in the 911 call made at the house, the woman screaming yelled, "They're coming, and oh God, they're hungry!" Hungry. Just like the kid in the drawing. Of course! That little girl murdered the cop! There was a return address on the journal, so Doug goes to the Kuttner Inn, a bed and breakfast run by an old woman named Mrs. Clara Wellman. While she examines the handwriting on the package, she eats some grapes. I show her the wrapping paper, and, between insane, juicy, dripping mouthfuls of her lunchtime treat, she recognizes the handwriting. Oh, sure! That Whatley fella, he's the one you want. Silent Hill is filled with kind, decent people with kind, decent values, like talking with your mouth full. Correction, those noises weren't insane, they were obscene, enough to make any healthy American man swear off oral sex for at least half a second or so. If oral sex sounds like eating grapes, then I think you might be doing one or the other wrong. Whatley. Ew, she's thinking about giving Whatley a blowjob? She describes Whatley, who of course matches the guy who pulled the disappearing act at the crime scene. So maybe the weird tentacle thing wasn't the first time I was seeing things today. Yet, Whatley was real. More importantly, Whatley can teleport! It was then that I started feeling this weird gnawing in my gut. The same hunger I'd get when I knew I was on top of a story that would never let me go. Only worse. The kind of hunger that physically hurts. The true horror of Silent Hill, the Munchies. Whatley had apparently been staying at the inn until last night, where he hastily left and gave her an extra week's rent for the inconvenience. And suddenly, Whatley has become the most likable character in any of these comics. I mean, aside from the dog in Dead Alive. And Joe. I miss Joe. Clara gives some late-night gossip as we're treated to an image of Whatley observing a nurse getting tied up near a guy, either with a whip or some kind of vibrator controller. Clara told me about Whatley's weird late-night comings and goings. Although that had nothing to do with sex. He was just there for the weekly board game night. Also, I would say that this was way more than I ever wanted to know about Whatley, but considering how friggin' little the comics have said anything about him, the fact that he's into watching kinky sex is one of the first bits of real, actual information about him we've ever seen. As Doug continues to listen to Clara, he notices something about her shadow. Only it wasn't her shadow. Not unless she had a head shaped like a pyramid. Oh my god! Clara's Darth Vader! Like, what is the implication here? That Pyramid Head was really this old lady who really noisily eats grapes? Pyramid Head isn't a symbol of judgment or repression or punishment or any of the other theories out there about the guy and why he shows up in other works beyond Silent Hill 2. No. Pyramid Head's really been the lady who runs a bed and breakfast this whole time. Anyway, Clara has no idea where Whatley went, but she had a description of the doctor and nurse. I guess the sex dude was a doctor, and that she thought they worked at Brookhaven Hospital. On the way there, Doug walks through the park in its unusually green glow.
Well, suddenly I have a refreshing mint flavor.
What the hell's even going on in this park with the glow? Is Mr. Burns dumping his toxic waste here?
I think it's full, sir.
That's ridiculous. The last tree held 9 drums.
And you know that an area glowing this much can only mean one thing for Doug. Now I'm radioactive! That can't be good! He spots a couple on a park bench, and the woman is ripping out part of the guy's neck. At first, I thought it was just another young couple necking. Well, technically, that's what they're doing. Christ, she was eating him alive. You taste like grape jelly and mustard. And from the moans and sighs he was making, he was loving every second of it. Wow, this sure is a great Hellraiser comic. So now we reach the point in our tale when our intrepid reporter starts to lose it, because there are only 2 logical possibilities before him. 1, elves. 2, vampire elves. He wonders if he's seeing things that aren't there, or worse, seeing things that are there. I mean, he could just go up and ask them why she's eating his neck, but hey, you don't want to come across as a prude to public displays of affection, am I right? He arrives at the hospital and tries to speak to the attending nurse, but all she can do is hold up a Twinkie and talk about foods she likes. The woman on the 911 call said they were hungry. The girl in the book was hungry. That led me to Clara and Whatley, Mr. Disappearing Act, this mystery doctor and his nurse, the couple in the park, the nurse on duty. And they were all hungry for one thing or another. Damn it! If only they had something in common! Her eyes were glazed over. All she could think about was stuffing her face, feeding her hunger. Hey, do you get what the name of the story is? Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? Do you get it? He contacts more people to try to get some more information and hear some weird stories. A wife who comes home and finds her husband with another woman, who apparently looks like a weird demon skull thing with tentacle hands. Oh no! She was the wife's maid of honor at the wedding! Oh right, and they were eating every damn thing in the house while they were at it. Eating the toaster was what eventually satisfied them. Another story featured a man rescuing his daughter from a living doll who was trying to murder her with a knife. And it wrote on the wall how it was hungry, and it even left a message on the wall, since it wasn't a talking doll. Oh, the doll can't talk, but it can eat? And you know that skinny guy who lives by himself down the line? The artist? It seems he's been collecting the heads from mannequins and setting them all over his place like trophies. Oh, so that's what was really going on in Silent Hill Painted Black. It really sucks when your cherished beliefs turn out to have absolutely no grounding in reality. Yeah, I understand. I have a deeply held belief that figures in comic art shouldn't look like they were cut and pasted onto a completely random background without any attempt at making them look integrated together. And yet here we are. There were only a couple of rational explanations that might cover what I was experiencing. Evil living doll vampire elves! He wonders if he was exposed to some kind of hallucinogen that everyone in town had been. He also realizes he hadn't talked to Rosie since that morning and, in hindsight, realizes he should have contacted her earlier, especially after he spots her in a vision before she vanishes. No, instead he finds someone else. Hey, Alan Moore, what are you doing here? Doug grabs a wooden board to defend himself, thinking he was dealing with some crazed homeless person. And indeed, the guy attacks him. I have seen the coming. I know his will. The order summons. The order commands. Samael of the Dark Eyes is come. His minions, they bite. They bite. And so do I. Ugh, you also don't brush from the looks of things. No witty comebacks, just ice stabbing me in the gut. Just a fear that this guy's bite carries some disease. just a hunger to survive. My apologies to those of you who've been playing the Silent Hill hunger drinking game, taking a shot whenever the word hunger or some mention of food comes up. You're probably unconscious by this point. He's rescued by Wutley, who grabs the homeless man and effortlessly tosses him into a wall, killing him from the force of the impact. Something I didn't notice before is that the guy doesn't have any arms, or at least it's almost like a straitjacket in his first appearance, a fact that Wutley comments on, his clothes becoming a part of his flesh. And I think the implication with this is that the homeless guy was transforming into the lying figure monster, again from Silent Hill 2. It's a creepy idea and supports the theory that the monsters in the game are actually people, either transformed into monsters or just looking like monsters to the protagonists. Although, considering the repeated references to Silent Hill 2, this is just making me think that that's the only one of the games that Scott C. Ensign has ever played, and for some reason decided that this thing needed to be an origin story for the monsters. Wutley walks off. Good to see you again, Douglas. And speaking of becoming, that is your task in this little drama too. What? What are you? As to the meaning behind my words, the truth you hunger for so terribly, just seek and you will find. And while you do, know that this world you know, this life you think you've been living, it all comes to an end tonight. And it's up to you to decide what happens next. I could just tell you everything right now, but I feel like being vague and pointless. Business as usual for Wutley. Then I feel it. The hunger. It's rising up from somewhere deep inside me. Must find Arby's! He starts hallucinating again, this time of Mario chewing him out over how he doesn't really care about the truth or journalism, before that gets replaced by Rosie naked in a bathtub filled with rose petals, saying she knows he's a good guy and is trying to hold back his hunger and his ambition. He finally gets out of his stupor. I come out of the haze, and I can feel the hunger clawing at me like a rat in my guts, trying to eat its way out. I'm beginning to suspect that Scott C. Ensign just wrote this whole story while waiting really long for a pizza to be delivered. Doug goes back to his office, but the sky has turned gray and fog is rolling into the town. One interesting aspect of this comic that I will grant it is that it starts us off in Silent Hill as a regular town. The game sometimes gave the impression that while the player was experiencing the town in a fog-filled ghost world or some hellish other world, there was an actual town of living, breathing people going about their lives in it. And this comic, in a unique twist, started us off in the normal city before it transitioned over to the fog world like this has. In any case, Doug is trying to collect himself and only confronts facts about the situation. Someone was murdered, and someone is either making him see things, or something is making everyone in the town go insane. But instead of calling up the CDC, or checking myself into the hospital for help, all I keep thinking about is her. Clara could have shared some of those grapes with me. It's like 8 p.m. and I haven't eaten anything all day! He's trying to get in touch with Rosie without success. Perkins comes in and Doug tells him about the file he started about Wutley that he wants him to follow up on. He also says to keep trying to contact Rosie for him while he's gone, but then he sees Perkins kind of transform into a monster. Some kind of heavyset creature with a massive mouth and hanging tongues. The lights also go out. Oh Jesus, the monsters all start as people, and this one, it's Perkins! Call for you! Oh, good, then Perkins can still follow up on the whole Wutley thing for you. Yeah? Was hungry. Coulda ate him. Too much work. Oh, come on, Perkins. You gotta have more of a can-do attitude if you want that raise. He listens to the phone call. Then I hear the voice on the other end of the phone.
Snob, it's Snob.
Please, you've got to help me. A woman's voice. One I know better than any other. Hillary Clinton? It's kinda late to ask for campaign contributions now. No, it's Rosie, who's saying that she's at the Fastbinder place too, basically repeating the 911 call, including mentioning how the things coming for her are hungry. Doug thinks, or at least hopes, that it's a trick, that someone is doing this to make him think that the person killed at the place was Rosie. Still, he can't ignore the possibility that what's happening is real, so he heads over. What he actually finds is Sheriff Bryce holding a gun on Wutley. Apparently off-panel, Bryce was investigating the same leads, and that brought him back to the house. Sheriff, are you sure you aren't hungry? Just a bit? Police officers are supposed to love donuts, after all. And I'd wager you have other appetites, just like every living thing in this town. My appetite is for seeing you get shot, Whatley. That's what I'm hungry for. Bryce just tells him he's under arrest, but Whatley explains that the cop who was killed earlier was just a link in a chain that is being forged for the benefit of our good friend, Douglas Brenneman. A chain that will bind Douglas, the witness, to us for all of a glorious and rapturous new age.
Oh, please.
Even now, Douglas sees what your young officer saw, the writing on the wall, so to speak. And a woman, a sacrifice. Is that his beloved Rosie? The light is so dim in here, who's to say? And what could those symbols mean? Well, mostly it means that I can save my game right there. And then Whatley shoots out a massive tongue that stabs Bryce through the heart. That would be horrific and all if Whatley didn't also call out "bleh" when he did so and make it unintentionally hilarious. And now there are donuts floating in front of Douglas.
What the hell?
I suppose you would like an explanation. You're certainly entitled to one. Yes, but I gave up on ever getting one 7 years ago.